pleasure. We now move to the Middle East. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is set to meet his Iranian counterpart on April the 19th in Oman as part of ongoing nuclear negotiations between Washington and Tehran. The talks come after Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared that Iran's uranium enrichment program is non-negotiable. Speaking after a cabinet meeting, Araghchi said Iran's enrichment is a real accepted matter. We are ready to build confidence, but enrichment itself is not up for discussion, he said. This follows a tougher stance from Envoy Witkoff, who called on Iran to stop and eliminate its enrichment activities, going beyond earlier demands for Iran to simply return to the 3.67% cap set under the 2015 nuclear deal. Araghchi criticised what he called contradictory and conflicting positions from the Trump administration, warning that mixed messages from Washington could derail the talks. He then added that Iran is open to discussing a broader framework, but will wait to see the US's true intentions in the next round. Last week's high-level talks, the most significant since President Trump abandoned the 2015 deal during his first term, were described by both sides as constructive. President Trump, who returned to office in January, has reinstated his maximum pressure policy, including sweeping sanctions on Iran. In March, he sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, urging renewed talks, but also the warning of possible military action if diplomacy fails. Khamenei acknowledged that the talks had begun positively, but cautioned that negotiations may or may not yield results. Meanwhile, President Trump has spoken with Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, reaffirming Oman's key role as a mediator in the process.
حرکتی تصمیم گیری شده داره اجرا میشه و بریم قدم های اول هم خوب حرکت شده، خوب اجرا شده. بعد از این هم بایستی کاملا با دقت دنبال بشه. خطوط قرمز مشخصه، برای طرف مقابل هم مشخصه، برای ما هم مشخصه و دنبال بشه مذاکرات به شکل خوب. ممکنه به نتیجه برسه، ممکنه نرسه. به طرف مقابل البته خیلی بدبین طرف مقابل رو قبول نداریم، میشناسیم طرف مقابل، اما به توانایی خودمون خوشبین هستیم، میدونیم که ما خیلی کارا میتونیم انجام.
As you know, an additional negotiation between Steve Witkoff and Iran's representative has been scheduled for Saturday. And since these are ongoing negotiations, I have nothing more to add on that.
اونچه که مسلمه غنیسازی ایران یک امر واقعی پذیرفته شده و حقیقی هست و ما برای اعتمادسازی نسبت به نگرانی‌های احتمالی آمادگی داریم، ولی اصل موضوع غنیسازی قابل مذاکره. مختلفی رو از طرف مقامات آمریکایی شنیدیم، بعضاً مواضع متضادی رو، و این اصلاً به نظر من کمک کننده به روند مناسب مذاکراتی نخواهد بود. با این حال ما باید در جلسه مذاکره مطلع بشیم از نظرات واقعی اونها. اگر که با مواضع سازنده‌ای بیایند، من امیدوار هستم که ما مذاکره در خصوص چارچوب یک توافق محتمل رو بتونیم شروع بکنیم. اگر که نه همچنان با مواضع متناقض و متضاد باشه، خب کار مشکل.
We are now joined by Pratik Joshi, researcher at the University of Oxford, joining us from New Delhi live. Pratik, thank you very much for joining us. These are the second round of talks held by Steve Witkoff, US envoy, and the foreign minister of Iran. What's going to be the biggest deal breaker on the table on April the 19th?
Thank you so much for having me. Given the American stance, which also reflects the same policy exercised by Trump during the negotiations on getting the Taliban to the table, like there are strong parallels. They are trying to pull off one or two big negotiables. And I think it is set to boil down to Iran's nuclear stockpile, its enrichment levels, and its nuclear weapons. So I think those 2-3 things will be at, they'll be the most high stakes involved. in these talks. But whether the Iranian side will budge, that's to be seen in the next round of talks.
Pratik, Iran's foreign minister has called uranium enrichment for Iran non-negotiable. Does that kill any chance of reviving a 2015 style cap?
So it's very difficult to say how the Iranians would react at this point of time, because they have this policy of springing up new surprises. But this time, they're very firm that this is one thing they'll not negotiate. And there's the history to it. They have a reason in saying so, because every time they've spoken to the Americans, be it a regime change or be it a change in stance of the specific party they negotiate, they have consistently complained that it's the American side that does not stick to one point. So that's one thing that needs to be considered.
Pratik, it's obviously not Donald Trump and the supreme leader of Iran directly meeting for these talks. It's the foreign minister and his special envoy to the Middle East. But what do you think of the dialogue the two have had? I mean, you've had Donald Trump threatening possible military action against Iran, and you've also had the supreme leader rebuffing his statements. What do you think of the sort of muddy communication between Tehran and Washington?
So one clear thing which we have noticed when it comes to back channels and indirect communications held by the Trump administration, there is a high degree of flexibility, although the rhetoric varies when it comes to Trump's positioning to the media. But we can vouch for the fact that there's this method in Trump's strategy. There's definitely scope for flexibilities, but it all changes when it comes to speaking to the media. So let's not be pessimistic on how the Trump has positioned himself. Yes, there's some clear red lines that he said, but there are definitely things that are being discussed with a great deal of flexibility. That's how I see it.
Pratik, Witkoff wants Tehran to stop and eliminate enrichment. A harder line number 4. Is this a negotiating bluff, or is it a new red line for the United States?
It's definitely a new red line, but we will have to wait for the details, because that's where the game is flipped. However, because unlike Trump's, Trump 1.0's negotiating tactics with other regimes, this time, because the Israeli pressure is very high. So that, I would say, while not ruling out the flexibility, that also reduces scope for, I would say, that clarity that we were expecting.
Would you mind delving into your statement that the Israeli pressure is very high in these talks? What do Israel have to do with these negotiations?
Having researched on that region and having been to the country itself, I don't see any appetite for, any flexibility on part of the Israelis when it comes to dealing with Iran. What they want is a complete elimination of the Iranian stockpile. And while they cannot do it on their own, pressurizing the US and lobbying to its maximum potential, that's one thing they've been deploying ever since Trump has come to power. This strategy was very much there in its more aggressive stance in Trump 1.2. This time, because the Gaza issue adds to the pressure. If you see the recent conversations, while Gaza is point number 1 on the table, but they're not shying away from raising the point on pressurizing Iran with the Americans.
Pratik Joshi, thank you very much for joining us. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more global news updates.